Creating Engagement in the Classroom, Understanding the Challenges of the Modern-Day Learning Environment
is written by Kevin Popovic and Ryan Vanshur.
And welcome to another webinar in our series, Creating Engagement in the Classroom. I'm Kevin Popovic, a lecturer at San Diego State University. Today we're going to build on our last webinar, Social Learning, Understanding Classroom Facilitation, by taking a deeper look at technology inside the modern higher education classroom. How are these tools shaping the way we learn? How are they affecting students? And what about professors?
And we're looking forward to answering these questions and more in just a moment. Again, I'm Ryan Vanshur, the undergraduate student at San Diego State University and co-author of the ebook with Kevin, Creating Engagement in the Classroom. Today's webinar is titled The Tech-Enabled Learning Environment, Digital Literacy, right? And so, like Professor Popovic said, we're going to really try to dissect this one and draw a few conclusions to help determine best practices for both professors and students alike.
So the overview of today's seminar is quite extensive. I'm going to talk about BYOD, bring your own device. What does it mean for the modern classroom? How does technology positively impact the learning environment? What are the downsides? 2 leading approaches to maintaining the integrity of the tech-enabled classroom, the professor's view, of course the student's view, and what does the current research say? And then Ryan will finish up with Q&A. So new technology continues to emerge and influence the higher education learning environment, and the exposure to these advancements influences the way all of us communicate, some of us more than others. So students now own all the hardware and software they want from one source or another, and they combine it with immediate and unlimited access to digital content, resources, and databases. They're connected to nearly everything at all times, making them the most technologically equipped students in history.
And in addition to this, you've got the BYOD, or Bring Your Own Device initiative, which is actually encouraging students to use their own personal electronics in the form of their smartphones, tablets, laptops during class time to supplement their learning. When available, students like myself who choose to participate with their devices are now showing a huge propensity to lean on this digital world to try to enhance and improve our own learning outcomes.
Now, with these new challenges come new opportunities in maintaining integrity in the learning process, and as a result in the classroom. The opportunities for students to learn increase, but so do the opportunities to lose control of the class and discussion. Right? Cheating, unfortunately, is easier than ever, as well as when the students can connect outside of the classroom in private online communities at the press of a button. Right? The unspoken objection by some in the adopting of EdTech currently sounds something like this: it's easier to keep teaching the same way than to learn a new pedagogy and teaching tools. Now, for some others, though, these opportunities act as a call to action.
Historically, we've been observing 2 prevailing methodologies for preserving classroom integrity, right? And so first we've got what they call rule compliance, and this just typically tells the students what they can do, what they can't do. Teachers, sets the rules, in the form of the syllabus. The students are expected to follow them, and if they don't, there's some sort of consequences that follow, outlined ahead of time, per the syllabus. The second one that we're looking at is things like the honor system. And this basically is, offering a method that has guidelines where students know what they should do, but this is more based on, establishing a moral compass that can support the learning and goals in the classroom. And so some schools and to some students, this really means something, this idea of, integrity in the classroom. But then if you go to other campuses, you could tell it certainly doesn't really hold weight, when it comes down to what's being practiced. And so when you integrate technology into the learning process, I think a hybrid of these 2 methods is typically applied to best preserve that type of integrity. And so the balance is dictated by, 1, the educator, and it's based on appropriateness, applicability, impact on learning, personal learning styles, skill sets. And then this actually requires the professor to become more invested, with his students and how they operate, which is something that ultimately may result in better outcomes for both sides.
Now, in order to establish a healthy tech culture, the educator must be a digital citizen. This is an understanding of what you can use in the classroom as much as it is a working understanding of how students communicate today. Now, we've mentioned in our last webinar that preparing students for the real world requires us to prepare them to be digitally literate. And this mentality really holds true in the modern classroom. Think about, however, it does hold up for true for the professor as well. To connect with this evolving student of today, the professor too must stay up to date and literate with current technologies.
And I've observed that, right? For many education professionals, this can be pretty daunting. Professors are trained in teaching and in their subject matter, and they're not really, and not so much, they're not trained in the changing technology that can bring the subject matter to their students. And so oftentimes this really deters professors from learning new technologies altogether. You know, being wrong or even just being misinformed on a very basic technology, you know, could potentially be embarrassing for a professor who's supposed to be the expert in the room. And so it becomes their duty to learn the new technology and learn, you know, in a workshop type environment, which can typically be provided by the campus, how to correctly apply these technologies to their classroom. And so leveraging it incorrectly is potentially more harmful than not leveraging it at all. And so many do take a non-committal route over, you know, the potential failure of a mishap with technology being onboarded into the class.
Now, personally, I'm an advocate of purposeful technology in the classroom. From entertainment to engagement, technology offers me different ways to improve my material in my classroom. As an educator, I like having options, and I'll often test from semester to semester what works and what works better. I also use technology to communicate, both for personal and professional purposes. Multiple devices, multiple platforms, multiple formats. It's part of my profession as well as my personal style. This comfort level and the success I have in the classroom is what keeps me in the ed tech game. And I also see my students using the same tech and the same tools, and they respond to the media that are most like theirs. When I use a medium that they do not understand, it impedes their interests, their ability, and their engagement. When we meet someone in the middle, though, we both get what we want in our class. Now, to maximize that effectiveness of this strategy, a culture of responsibility and trust is required to foster the classroom dynamic and to encourage collaboration from all stakeholders in the educational experience. A tech-enabled classroom in this example requires inputs from both professor and students to create valuable outputs. Now, traditionally, classroom technology has been created to integrate with the confines of existing systems of curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment. Now, today, these EdTech innovations, combined with the widespread adoption and access to the internet, are transforming old educational infrastructures and creating a fresh set of challenges and opportunities left to be explored. And what better place to do this than in academic institutions? Where EdTech used to be a specialty, it's now a compulsory. Digital literacy for educators helps get you hired and stay relevant among the new breed of educators who are coming in teaching already mobile savvy and equipped to integrate modern technologies into their lesson plans. So stay on top of current technologies and how to leverage them in the classroom, and you can stay afloat and thrive in the modern teaching environment.
So right now, I'm actually I graduate this summer, so I'm a semester away from completing my undergraduate coursework. And in my experience, you know, just kind of wrapping up in higher education, the whole process has felt very transitive in nature. And so what I mean by that is it really, like early on, I really thought education was something that had to be done to me, so to speak, in more of a one-way street where I go and the teacher teaches and I listen, and the conversation typically ended there. But recently I've noticed there's like a slow and steadily growing body of students who really want a voice in the learning process, and they're really trying to create, you know, design their own learning structure. And so this growing population of students, we see education as something, you know, to be done with and by students, as opposed to just something that's done to us, or, you know, checking boxes in a syllabus. And so what we're trying to do is tear down these one-way street signs and open up what we would call multi-lane educational highways that allow for this type of contribution to that learning environment. And so if it's true that learners are more readily, you know, adopting and adapting technology, I think it makes sense that technology has an important role to play in encouraging student expression, also creating more meaningful connections, you know, inside and outside the classroom, and then increasing, you know, the motivation to engage in the learning process in methods that students prefer. And so if you combine, you know, this with useful analytics, you know, you can come up with a much more sophisticated approach to evaluations and assessments, you know, rather than the students', you know, qualitative view of how the semester went. You can actually measure learning outcomes with some of the data, which will result in better learning outcomes for both professors and students.
First, the power of candor. San Diego State University's Dr. Jennifer Imazeki has explored this topic in great detail, providing several insightful studies and reports as a result. Recently, she talked about utilizing a BYOD approach to create better learning outcomes. Chiefly, she suggested treating students like adults. While it may seem obvious, it's not a tenet that is universally applied in the modern classroom. Telling students up front that they will be expected to use their mobile devices to answer questions throughout the lecture, not to send texts and snaps or tweets, Dr. Mazecki establishes a baseline level of respect and appropriate use of technology. This is a perfect example of the hybrid rule of compliance and honor system we mentioned earlier. There's no explicit penalty using a mobile device improperly, but she plays on the student's morality, a touch by letting them know on day one it's inappropriate and uncumbering to do so. I am convinced that the best weapon against any of these distractions is to make sure students are fully engaged in the class, she says. If I see too many students on their phones when I think they should not be, it is a signal to me that I must be doing something to re-engage their attention. Lastly, limit response times to reduce the temptation to cheat. Given enough time to respond to in-class prompts, students will find a way to cheat. One text to a friend, one quick scan of Google search results, and they can find the correct answer quickly and easily. By limiting response times to about a minute, Dr. Imazeki finds students are less likely and inclined to cheat. It's simply not enough time to get what they're looking for, and they'll instead work to answer the question as intended. So it's important to note that the innovation in higher education does not necessarily require high-tech or complex solutions. Often, innovation is about establishing an attitude or culture around solutions that use existing, easy-to-use, and common ideas that are a familiar part of learners' everyday lives, such as social networks, games, and discussion forums. By managing the culture of the classroom, Dr. Imazeki one can improve learning outcomes and teaching outcomes alike.
One of the biggest and most common challenges educators face is maintaining integrity in more qualitative forms of evaluation. And so Turnitin.com is a tool that actually analyzes students' written work and checks for plagiarism within the content. Having a system that actually allows you to pre-screen for this type of behavior can save significant time off the grading process. Some of the other text-based checks and balances, obviously Respondus, which is a lockdown browser. This is a useful tool that allows for test taking on laptops and PCs. I've actually used this in a few classes, and students are actually engaged in the test, and they're unable to search, and switch tabs and do a couple other things online. And so for distance learning and hybrid courses, this typical tool can be very popular. And as you become more familiar with these new age methods of dishonesty, these new solutions will pop up to kind of help curb those cheating behaviors.
Well, Coursekey is a tool that I personally use inside my classrooms, and I find it opens up the two-way educational highways that you were talking about, Ryan, and removes the one-way barriers of the traditional lectures. A unique combination of classroom management and social learning tools offers both students and educators performance and engagement analytics that keep both parties updated to their progress during the entire academic period. Too often the real-time learning environment, I think, is unable to capture the learning activity data, and tools like these help make this type of information much more useful.
The success of technology in the classroom is contingent on context, culture, and circumstances in which the adoption is executed. And so new technologies for learning, obviously, we mentioned, are not going to replace educators. So KP, you're safe for now.
Thanks.
But unless educators know how to leverage these tools, as you said, learning is never going to get any better either, right? And so there's a clear crossroads in today's higher education environment where educators are needing to adopt and integrate, students' own communication strategies as a, strategy for their teaching, but also mobile and online preferences, that result in many opportunities to engage in new and innovative ways that typically weren't available to professors before. And so identifying the motivation, for these being in the classroom can help provide insight into what an educator, one should choose, but then more importantly, how they can best implement it should they choose to make that transition.
Great summary, Ryan. Couldn't agree more. I do have a couple questions for you, though. How do professors engage you with the technology inside the classroom? I mean, what makes you want to stay off your phone and computer when you're in class?
There's always two types of professors. There's ones that mean it and ones that don't mean it. And I think the ones that mean it, and as soon as you see the first student get thrown out of the class, for misuse of technology, that's typically a good indicator that this isn't a play around environment. However, there's other ones that you can tell typically don't necessarily mean stay off your phone. They just mean show me respect, right? They'll tell you if you get a phone call, it's important. Just do me the favor, get up, walk out of the class. And so I find that professors that, show respect in order to get it, typically have a lot more I would say, engagement from the students that are willing and able to meet them halfway in the middle, putting the technology away when it's required, but also being able to pull it out and use it when it's necessary. And so I think finding that balance is very important to be able to distinguish, or at least be sophisticated enough as a student to determine, when am I doing something that's helping me learn, and when am I generally being not only a distraction to myself but the other students around me by bringing this type of technology out.
Right.
And obviously, KP, for you to flip it around, do you find educational technology to play, I guess, to break it down, a supportive role or a disruptive role in higher education? And how do you minimize students using technology improperly in the classroom, while maintaining your classroom integrity?
Well, I think, in your question, do I find educational technology plays a supportive role? Yeah, I think by definition, educational technology plays a supportive role. I think technology can be a disruptive role, but by calling it educational technology, I think we're making the assumption that it's purposeful technology. So there's a couple things that I do. I like our professor's example. I'm pretty clear at the beginning of the class what my expectations are, and I think that it's an opportunity to kind of set a bit of a where expectations are for me, personally and professionally. And then as I view technology, I don't ban technology in my classroom, and I know that there's times that they're doing things on the devices that I wish that they didn't do. Right? When it becomes a distraction to me, I let it be known, and I think that you can do so just with a bit of a look and a little heads up, and it doesn't have to disrupt the class. I don't have to make it into something big. And anytime that I've had to do that, the student usually kind of acknowledges me, and it tends to not be an issue again. And if it is, it's something we can talk about after class. But I don't find the technology to be disruptive. I do find it to be purposeful, and I do my part to make sure that the students know that it has a purposeful place in my class, and I use it purposefully. So not only do I tell them how things are going to be in my classroom, I demonstrate to them how things are going to be in my classroom. Does that make sense?
And are you using a hybrid of those two approaches that we talked about? Are you doing the honor system and sort of the
Very much so, because we can't. I just can't tell them no, you can't do it, right? But if I set the expectations and say, listen, this is how I look at it, and I explain my take on it, and I let them know that it's going to be an honor system, that I am not going to worry about like walking behind you and checking on what your device is. I think there's a sense of respect, and I'll tell you, 98% of the students in my class abide by that going into it. So that really does leave me with just a very small percentage of students and incidents that I have to deal with inside my classroom, and with those kind of odds, I'll take that every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that wraps up our 8th webinar in the series, and a particularly engaging and thought-provoking topic for myself and for other professors as we continue to serve students like Ryan by leveraging technology inside our classrooms. And while this installment has come to an end, the discussion continues.
Absolutely, and you can download our ebook, Creating Engagement in the Classroom, to learn more about how to create engagement in your classroom. And whether you're a teacher or a student, we encourage you to reach out and participate in the conversation. You can comment on our blogs that can be found on our website, creatingengagementintheclassroom.org, or just follow our conversations on social media and interact with us using the hashtag #CreatingEngagement.
Thanks everyone for joining our conversation today. Thank you, Ryan, and please consider sharing this with your fellow educators and students so they can share their expertise, their opinions, and experiences on creating engagement as well. Thanks, everyone.
Creating Engagement in the Classroom, Understanding the Challenges of the Modern-Day Learning Environment is written by Kevin Popovic and Ryan Vanshur.
To learn more about creating engagement in your classroom, visit creatingengagementintheclassroom.org or follow hashtag #CreatingEngagement.